There is a specific moment that happens to most people somewhere in their 50s. It is not dramatic. There is no alarm, no announcement, no obvious signal that anything has changed. But something shifts in the way they think about time. Suddenly, the future does not feel infinite anymore. The years ahead feel real and countable in a way they never did before. And with that shift comes a question, sometimes quiet, sometimes urgent, that most people in their 30s and 40s never seriously ask themselves. Is what I am doing with my money actually going to get me where I need to be? My name is Richard Harlow. I have spent more than 4 decades working with people at every stage of their financial lives. And I can tell you with complete confidence that the years between 50 and 65 are the most consequential financial years most people will ever live. Not the 20s, when the habits are being formed. Not the 30s, when the career is accelerating. The 50s, because in your 50s you still have time to change course. Real time, meaningful time. But you no longer have the luxury of assuming the future will correct the present automatically. The decisions you make in this decade will shape the next 3 decades of your life more completely than almost anything else you could do. What I want to share with you today are 5 rules. Not tips, not tricks. Rules. The kind of foundational principles that, once understood and actually applied, change the entire trajectory of a financial life. I have watched people discover these rules at 50 and completely transform what their 60s and 70s looked like. I have also watched people ignore them and arrive at 70 wondering why the security they worked toward never quite materialized. The difference between those 2 groups was almost never income. It was almost always understanding. The first rule is one that sounds simple until you sit with it long enough to feel its full weight. And it is this. The goal is not to earn more. The goal is to keep more of what you earn. This distinction sounds obvious, and yet it is violated constantly, consistently, and almost universally by people who should know better, including people who are genuinely intelligent and genuinely hardworking. The reason is that earning more is visible. It shows up in a salary figure, in a business revenue number, in a commission statement. It feels like progress because it is measurable and because the culture we live in celebrates it. Keeping more of what you earn is invisible. It happens in the margins, in the small decisions, in the habits that nobody sees and nobody celebrates. And because it is invisible, it is consistently underestimated. Here is what I have watched happen to people who focus exclusively on earning more without building the discipline to keep more. They get a raise, and their lifestyle expands to consume it. They make a good investment, and the returns go into a new car, a renovation, a vacation that was slightly beyond what they could actually afford. They receive an inheritance, and within 3 years the inheritance is gone, not squandered recklessly, but absorbed, gradually and completely, into a life that was simply more expensive than it needed to be. The number that comes in has no chance of compounding because it never stays long enough to begin. I knew a man named Thomas, 53 years old, regional sales director, earning a very strong income by any measure. Thomas had been earning well for 15 years. He should have been in an excellent financial position. He was not. Not because he spent recklessly. He was not a reckless man. But because his lifestyle had grown in precise proportion to his income, every single time his income grew, for 15 years. He was, by his own description, living paycheck to paycheck at a very high income level. When we sat down together and looked at the actual numbers, Thomas was genuinely shocked to discover that a colleague of his who earned significantly less, but who had been consistently keeping a meaningful percentage of every dollar he made since his mid-30s, had built a financial position that Thomas would need another decade of perfect discipline to replicate. The practical application of this rule is not complicated, but it requires a commitment that many people resist. Before your money has a chance to become spending, direct a fixed percentage of every dollar of income into a position where you cannot casually access it. Not what is left over after you have lived your life for the month. A percentage that comes off the top, automatically, before you have the chance to make it available to the 100 small decisions that will otherwise consume it. The exact percentage matters less than the consistency. 15% kept faithfully and consistently over a decade produces more than 30% kept erratically and only when convenient. The second rule builds directly on the first, and it is the one that separates people who build real financial security from people who simply earn well. The rule is this: understand the difference between assets that build your wealth and expenses that consume it, and make every significant financial decision through that lens. This sounds like something everyone knows. Almost nobody actually applies it. An asset, in the only definition that matters for this conversation, is something that puts money into your life over time. A rental property that generates income. A portfolio of dividend-paying stocks that pays you quarterly. A business stake that distributes profits. A skill that commands a premium in the market for years. An expense is something that takes money out of your life over time. A car that depreciates. A subscription that charges monthly for something you use occasionally. A home that costs more in maintenance, insurance, and taxes than the equity it builds in your favor. The challenge is that many things that feel like assets are, when examined honestly, expenses in disguise. And after 50, the cost of misclassifying them is higher than it has ever been, because you have fewer earning years ahead in which to recover from the consequences. I am not saying that expenses are wrong, or that you should not spend money on things that improve the quality of your life. I am saying that you should know which category every significant financial commitment falls into, and you should be making intentional choices about the ratio between them. Most people over 50, when they sit down and honestly classify every major item in their financial life, discover that the ratio is not what they thought it was. That discovery, while uncomfortable, is the beginning of the only adjustment that actually changes anything. The third rule is the one that most people in their 50s understand intellectually, and almost nobody acts on with the urgency it deserves. And it is this: time is your most expensive resource, and every year you delay a good financial decision costs you more than the year before. The mathematics of compounding are taught in almost every basic finance course. The emotional reality of compounding, the felt understanding of what it actually means for your life, is almost never absorbed until it is too late to take full advantage of it. Here is what compounding means in practice for someone who is 52 years old. If you have a sum of money that you invest today with a reasonable return, that money has approximately 13 years to compound before you reach 65. 13 years of growth, of interest earning interest, of gains accumulating on previous gains. If you wait 5 years to make that same decision, if you tell yourself you will start when things settle down, when the kids are through school, when you feel more financially stable, you have 8 years, not 13. 8. And the difference between 13 years of compounding and 8 years of compounding on any meaningful sum of money is not the difference between good and slightly less good. It is the difference between financial security and financial anxiety in the decades ahead. The delay always feels reasonable in the moment. There is always a genuine reason to wait. The timing is never perfect. And each year that passes, while the reason holds, feels neutral, as though nothing is being lost, as though the opportunity is simply being deferred. It is not being deferred, it is being reduced. Every year of delay is a year of compounding permanently removed from the outcome. That year does not come back. The person who starts at 52 and the person who starts at 57 will never arrive at the same place, regardless of how hard the second person works once they begin. The fourth rule is the one I consider the most underestimated, and it is this: the single most important financial investment you can make after 50 is in your own financial knowledge. Not in a specific stock, not in a particular fund, not in a property or a business or any external asset. In your own understanding of how money actually works. Because every other investment you make will be better or worse, depending on the quality of the decisions surrounding it. And the quality of those decisions is entirely dependent on what you understand. I have seen people with modest incomes and deep financial understanding build extraordinary security over a 30-year period. I have seen people with significant incomes and shallow financial understanding arrive at 65 having built almost nothing that will sustain them. The variable that separated them was not luck, and it was not income. It was understanding. And understanding, unlike talent or opportunity, is genuinely available to anyone willing to pursue it. Books, courses, conversations with people who know more than you do, a willingness to sit with confusion long enough to move through it to clarity. The investment required is time and attention, and the return on that investment, measured in the quality of every financial decision you make for the rest of your life, is the highest return available to you at any price. The fifth rule is the one that brings everything else together, and it is the rule that most people resist the longest before finally accepting it as true. The rule is this: financial security is not a number, it is a system. People who do not yet have financial security almost universally believe that the missing ingredient is a larger number. More income, a bigger portfolio, a higher balance in the account. If I just had more, they tell themselves, everything would fall into place. But more, without a system, simply becomes more to manage, more to spend, more to lose. The people I have watched build genuine, lasting, resilient financial security are not the people who had the most. They are the people who built systems, consistent habits, automatic behaviors, clear rules about how money flows into and through their lives, and then maintained those systems with a fidelity that eventually made the outcomes inevitable. A system is not complicated. It is a set of decisions made once, in advance, and then executed automatically without requiring willpower or motivation every time. A percentage of income that goes directly to savings before it touches a checking account. A rule about debt that is never violated. A schedule for reviewing your financial position that is kept regardless of how uncomfortable the review might be. A clear policy about what categories of spending are acceptable and what categories are not, decided in advance and not renegotiated in the moment of desire. The reason systems work and willpower does not is simple. Willpower is a finite resource that depletes under stress and temptation. A system is a structure that removes the need for willpower by making the right behavior automatic, and the wrong behavior require active effort to pursue. Building the system takes time and discipline. Living inside the system, once built, is simply how you live. And the financial outcomes that the system produces are not the result of any single brilliant decision. They are the accumulated result of thousands of small, correct, automatic behaviors made over years. I want to leave you with something that a client of mine named Eleanor, 61 years old, recently retired teacher, said to me in one of our last sessions together. Eleanor had started working with me at 54, when she had almost nothing saved and was genuinely frightened about her future. Over 7 years, by applying principles not unlike the ones I have shared with you today, she had built a financial position that she described as more than she had ever expected to have. I asked her what had surprised her most about the process. She thought about it for a moment and then said, "I always thought it would require doing something extraordinary. It turned out to require doing something ordinary, every single day, without stopping." That is, in my experience, as complete a description of financial security as I have ever heard. Before you close this video, I want to ask you something honest. Of the 5 rules we discussed today, keeping more than you earn, understanding assets versus expenses, acting on good decisions now rather than later, investing in your own financial knowledge, and building a system rather than depending on willpower, which one do you know you have been avoiding? Leave it in the comments. I read every one. And I think the answer to that question might be the most useful thing you take away from today.